supplies have made their way now to KwaZulu-Natal from Johannesburg today, with the operation set to continue throughout the weekend and into the new week. This comes after weeks or rather week-long violence and looting in the province. Now, the unrest has resulted in the shortage of supplies, including bread and diapers. The locals, as well as NGOs, have partnered with the fleet managers to transport supplies from Johannesburg to Durban.
This is one of our second trips already. This one going now, where there's some food in there. We've got nappies, we've got essentials for formula, with everything focusing a lot on babies and helping families in need like that. We're moving that now from Grand Central Station and we're taking it down to KZN, where Grace Church will get it there, and then from there we're going to distribute it to the people that need it from there again. There's so many people involved on the ground there trying to get everything where it needs to be at this stage.
Non-profit organizations often find themselves having to care for those who are in most need in disaster situations, such as the current unrest. Well, we have been experiencing this here in Gauteng as well as in KwaZulu-Natal. To talk more about this, we are now joined by the Executive Director of Inyathelo, Nazima Mohammed. Nazima, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight here on In Focus. In the short term, government is announcing food parcels, food vouchers and cash to bring some relief. However, in the long term, what's the situation that we're going to be faced with in the context, of course, that we are still feeling quite a little bit of strain because of the pandemic that is ongoing?
Good evening, Thabo, and hello to your viewers as well. Could you repeat the question, please?
I'm saying in the short term, the President has announced that the Social Development Department should issue out food parcels, food vouchers, and some cash. That is in the short term. Of course, the country is still battling with the strains that have been brought by the pandemic. What is the situation going to look like post this particular unrest?
Well, the situation currently has been that many of the non-profit organizations are really suffering on the ground. They're not only suffering the implications of the pandemic, but many have lost staff, they've had to cut budgets, some have shut down, and we're seeing that we find a sector that's already under a great deal of strain being further impacted by what has happened over the past few days. You know, from where we sit, we're very, very concerned about what's going to happen to civil society as a whole because of the impact on the non-profit sector, and they play a huge role in the development, in social development and the provision of services to our country, social services to our country. Inyathelo does support on financial sustainability. And we've found more and more organizations coming to us, you know, really struggling to pay their staff, struggling to survive. And that was during the pandemic, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic. We're at a stage now where some have just closed down because of the lack of support to the non-profit sector from government.
How would you advise them to respond to these challenges?
Well, I think there really is a need for the sector to become more organized in terms of building strong alliances and networks. And we need to convene and have that social sector summit that was promised by the President about 3 years ago. You know, the non-profit sector is called the Cinderella of all sectors because we've constantly been excluded from any of the discussions, and where we are involved, it's quite limited at NEDLAC. And we know that with NEDLAC there have been many problems on how the sector is represented there. And so I would say that they need to review the NEDLAC constituency for civil society and how we represent it, that the sector needs to be much more organized in terms of coming together. But when you're working under such strain and you're really meeting the needs in terms of food security and health and wellness, there is no time to actually collaborate in the way we need to actually put on the agenda of government the issue of the, you know, of how we build a social compact between business, government, and civil society.
Right, we have seen some kind of knee-jerk reaction to the unrest, but going forward, what would be your advice in terms of how do we balance, this is NGOs, the need to address this pressing new issue over and above, of course, the pandemic we have been dealing with, and comparing that to the operational constraints of finances that the sector has been dealing with?
Well, it's important that there is self-care. That if nonprofits don't take care of their own staff, they won't be able to function. And we're seeing trauma really featuring quite highly. Issue of health and wellness, mental health and wellness being a big issue throughout the country, and it's impacted on the sector as well. And so we're living in such difficult times, Thabo. Talking to everyone knows that. But I really believe that, with self-care and with a collective conversation between government, the business community, and the non-profit sector, that there's a way of building, of reconstructing, of working towards a different type of future, one that is much more inclusive, one that, the basic income grant it's not going to be an issue, it's just going to be implemented. They're going to review the budget and deal with the poverty and inequality issues that we see in the country. And if anything, this past week has shown that poverty and inequality is a huge, huge matter, and we're sitting on a keg. And, there has to be some redistribution of wealth in this country in order for us to survive. And the ANC and the factionalism within it, it is something that we as a country need to actually take task, to deal with. We cannot continue the way we have. The president calls it an insurrection, but it's really the ANC imploding, an ANC that we all fought for, a liberation movement that we backed up and supported, and to see it turn into what it has, into this monster, is really so devastating for many of us who have been part of the movement. And to see what has happened to the people of South Africa, what's happened to the people in KwaZulu-Natal, it has been the most distressing time, I think, for many of us in this country, to see us come to this point after all those years of really putting an effort to change an apartheid government to land up with what we have now.
Yeah. Talk to me then, Nazima, about the toolkits that people can access from Inyathelo, especially non-profit and civil society organizations, to help them, to resource them, particularly as they battle, as you're talking, issues of trauma and anxiety, but also just generally navigating this period.
Well, we have many, many free resources that are online and easily available. We also have a non-profit clinic, and so if your nonprofit is struggling, they can call us or email us, and we respond. So Inyathelo has a list of associates who we work with, and we use the expertise of our own staff to respond to pressing issues that may emerge within a nonprofit organization. We've been doing a lot of work on governance support, training of boards and getting them to be compliant, and understanding their fiduciary responsibilities. We've also been working on financial sustainability models and how one does fundraising, because there really is a theory behind how one does fundraising. We don't believe in a charitable model of getting funds, but that there's, if your organization is purpose-driven, that you can align with individuals out there, businesses out there, philanthropy out there who have the same purpose in mind, and that once you match the common interests, that you're able to generate funds. We're looking at issues around disaster recovery and risk management as well. And so Inyathelo has it has a range of resources, indigenous resources that's really tailored to the South African context, but we also draw on resources from other parts of the world in relation to building strong non-profit organizations, building capacity in a number of areas. And it's not just financial sustainability and governance. It could be human resources. It could be, looking at communications and public relations, because all of those things, we call them the 10 elements of advancement, they all come together and make an organization attractive. How you build relationships outside of your organization is another key area. And so our model of advancement speaks to all of these areas, and it tries to strengthen organizations by taking them through that model.
Nazima, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for joining us tonight on In Focus. Nazima Mohammed, Executive Director of Inyathelo, with us tonight. We'll continue in a moment.